Olli Haaskivi, welcome to An Actor Despairs. How are you doing?
Hi, I'm doing all right. How are you doing?
I'm better now, man. It's great to have you on. I just want you to know that I see you. I see the work you're doing, and I love it. It's so inspiring. Your career, if I'm being totally honest, is where I hope to be in 2 to 5 years. Like I see the work that you're doing. You're on all the best shows, and Manifest, Falcon, and Winter Soldier now. I mean, you're
hmm
exploding the Deuce. You've worked with so many friends of mine, Chris Bauer, Bill
hmm
Pullman. You're doing amazing work, and I don't know you, but I just feel so proud of you.
Thank you so much. That's incredibly flattering. I feel lucky to be here. Thank you for having me.
Well, I'm excited to get to know you, but in order to do that, I'd love to start from the beginning. Where did you grow
Let's
up?
do it. I was born in Cleveland, Ohio, and we lived there until I was about 8 years old. And then my dad got a job near Sarasota, Florida, so we moved there. And that's where I feel like I did most of my growing up, because from the time I was 9 until I left for college,
Do you
we were in
even
Florida.
remember Cleveland much or not really?
A little bit. And I still have a couple of friends from being there till I was 9. But yeah, all I think all of my real growing up was in Sarasota, Florida.
Wow, that's amazing. And talk to me. I mean, honestly, Cleveland and Florida, they just seem on such different ends of the spectrum. What
hmm
what was that like when you moved to Florida? Did you love it or
No, I in Cleveland went to the same school until I was in the third grade, and I felt like I had my friends, and I liked that school and liked those people,
also
and
wow.
and so I think it was mildly traumatic. If my parents are listening, it's all good. I turned out
We're
okay
gonna
enough,
invoice them
but
for the therapy today.
exactly. I
Yeah.
really, I really appreciate it. Um, but I do think it was a little upsetting to move to Florida and to go to a small school where all of those kids had been together since kindergarten and I wasn't one of them. And it was also a school that it was a small private school, and it very much sort of catered to one type of economic background and one type of, I felt like it was a lot of kids that were the children of doctors and lawyers,
Yeah.
and I was already in fourth grade turning into a weirder artsier kid who loved musicals and knew all the words to musicals, and in a small school with 20 other kids who've known each other since they were toddlers, that doesn't go great for you.
Yeah.
It ended up being fine, but and there's a lot that I love about having grown up in Sarasota, but the actual move I think was challenging.
I can only imagine, that almost happened with me, and I begged my parents not to, and it ended up not happening. But
Oh wow.
well, my parents are divorced, but one was going to move, and I really relate to that. So talk to me about, when that trauma happened. Were you already into the arts at that time, or do you feel like in Florida it kind of forced you because you had to build all over again that you were using entertainment as a means to you know not feel as alone.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a little bit of both. I mean, my parents took me and my younger sister to see a lot of theater in Cleveland when we were really
At the
young. So
Cleveland
we
Playhouse, or
at the Cleveland Playhouse, and usually like the tours of the musicals that would come in or take us to the ballet or those things. I
the
mean,
Rock and Roll
neither of
Hall
my
of Fame.
parents. Uh-huh. My
Yeah.
my name is on a brick outside of that
Is it
because
really?
our family donated, $100 or something to it. And
Wow.
as a result, you got your name on a brick. Um, but so my parents, neither of them are in the arts, but they are into it. And so they would bring my sister and I. We saw the Marie Osmond tour of The Sound of Music. We saw Cats. We saw Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat, like those kinds of things. And I was always enamored with it when we were seeing the shows in Cleveland. But what you say is really interesting because it wasn't until we moved to Florida that I actually got involved. At the end
Yeah.
of my fourth grade year, I auditioned for my first show in community theater in Bradenton, Florida, and got cast. And that was, I do think that that was crucial timing because I wasn't really feeling great at that school, but I did feel great in that theater with those people, one of whom is still, one of my best friends in the world. And so I do think the timing of it doesn't feel coincidental looking
Yeah.
back.
That's amazing.
And
And
also, sorry, go ahead.
no, no, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Please.
No, I was gonna say, luckily, unbeknownst to us when we moved, the Bradenton, Sarasota area of Florida has a ton of theater. And so it's a little bit different now, but when I was growing up there, there were 6 or 7 professional theaters, probably 4 or 5 community theaters. And so we had landed in this town. There were sort of a couple towns very nearby. But we landed in this area where there was a ton of opportunity. And so starting from the end of fourth grade until I graduated high school, I was really regularly doing shows at those theaters.
That's incredible. And just to expound upon it, when you say community theater, you mean it was not associated with your school at all?
No, not at all. And actually, I mean, I ended up leaving that small private school to go to an arts high school in Sarasota. And that arts high school is a wonderful place for many reasons, but they used to, at least when I was there, they did 4 plays a year. And I only did one of them in my 4 years of high school because I was always doing shows outside of school at the other
Wow.
theaters.
How big was the age demographic at the community theater? Did they cap it at 18 or were people
No, it was all it was all over the map. And Florida has a not small retirement community. And so, there were people from, the age of 4 or 5 to the age of 95.
That's so beautiful. I'm curious because you did leave all your Cleveland friends behind. Did that become your new home? Everyone you met at the community theater, did you feel comfortable? And was that your saving grace, so to speak?
I think so. And actually, I ended up doing more shows at a couple of the professional theaters in Sarasota. And so my family, it's very strange to look back on, but a lot of that family feeling or a lot of the friends that I felt like I had at that time were actors that were jobbing in from New York or Los Angeles to come do a musical in Sarasota, Florida for 3 months.
Was it
And
equity?
yeah,
Wow. So you were getting your
um,
equity card so early.
I wasn't doing any of the official like I didn't do any of the paperwork to register for my
Okay.
equity card at the
Got it.
time. For good or for bad, I guess it doesn't really matter looking back, but yeah, I was technically getting paid, but I was not and other plenty of other people involved were members of the union, but I wasn't like building up to that at that time.
And I'm curious, I have to ask, how were your parents responding to you integrating so much into the art scene? Were they cool with that? Or were they like, hey, lawyer, doctor, you went to a private school that, like talk to me.
Yeah, I really lucked out in that department, I have to say. I mean, my dad was a soccer player professionally and he coaches now, and my mom is an interior decorator. And so I think they both have careers where they understand what it is to follow the thing that you're passionate about. And so I don't know that they still understand a lot of the specifics of what being an actor is actually like, but I do think at a very basic level, they understand what it is to be excited about something and to want to pursue it.
Wow.
And so, I mean, I can't imagine the amount of driving they did to take me to and from rehearsals or dance classes and those things. And there was sort of the feeling of, yeah, you can follow whatever you want to follow, but you better work really hard.
Yeah.
There was no um I was definitely not coddled as a child. I was not raised as the most special, most talented kid around or anything. They were sort of like, yeah, cool, you're interested in this and that's great. But if you're going to do it, you should really do it.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. That's, I mean, that's amazing to have that from your parents. And I got to ask, at what point did you recognize this was your calling?
That's a really good question. I mean, I think that if you asked someone else who knows me really well, I think they maybe would say that it's been the case since I was, 4 or 5 or 6 years old. I think it's natural to, and I'm so curious to know about all of your experiences too, but I think it's natural to have questions along the
Of
way
course.
and to sort of waver from time to time. And I mean, I still feel that way. I'm 34 years old and I've done okay for myself, but I still have plenty to wonder about in terms of what my future might look like. But I think it's the kind of thing that it was always there, but there were certainly moments where I wasn't so sure, or moments where, maybe it would go 6 or 8 months and I wouldn't do a show at one of those theaters in
Yeah.
town. And my mom or dad would sort of be like, are you still interested? It's okay if you're not,
Yeah.
but we've noticed that you haven't wanted to do anything in a little while. And I also went to this performing arts high school that was incredibly competitive and
Like a
was a
LaGuardia type school of Florida.
yeah, and it was really sort of cutthroat and political, and I was introduced to a lot of not ideal components of how this can feel at a very young age.
Whoever's
And I
parents
do,
donate the most get the best roles. That's how it usually went.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
yeah,
yeah, yeah.
specifics of that I don't need to air out
No,
in this forum,
that's all you had to
but
say. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. And so I remember dealing with a lot of that nonsense as like a sophomore in high school and feeling like, is this really something you want to put yourself through? Or you're certainly not very supported where you are in the moment. Is that
Yeah.
an indication of something? But I kept coming back to how much I love it and how, it's probably the thing that makes me feel the most alive and a community that I really love and care about. And, it's easy to sort of blow it off and say, I just couldn't come up with anything else. And that is partially true.
Yeah.
But, but yeah, I mean, I think it is the kind of thing that from a very young age was the thing that I was dreaming about. And then naturally, as is the case with everybody, probably along the way, there have been some rough patches or patches where I'm
Always.
questioning a lot of things.
An actor despairs. But
Yeah, I mean, it's an extraordinary title. So
no,
congratulations
thank you.
on that.
So talk to me, because we're not that far in age. I'm 31, and I grew up
Oh,
in
cool.
Richmond, Virginia, and at the time we were coming up, Richmond and Wilmington, what Atlanta now is. Were
Hmm.
you ever doing the agent in the Florida grind, or were you not there yet?
I wasn't, and I think I maybe missed it a little bit. I remember when I was really young, a lot of those Nickelodeon shows would advertise that they were shooting in Orlando,
Oh,
Florida,
at
or
Universal. God.
yeah,
Yeah.
but I think I maybe missed that by a couple of years.
Okay.
And I also have a suspicion that my parents maybe would have drawn the line at something like that.
Yeah. Yeah. Because
I don't
that's
know for sure.
Yeah, that's incredible. So talk to me then. As you're getting along in high school, you said it didn't sound like you had the best support there, but at your community theater, did you have like, some seasoned actors that were coming through and took a liking to you and gave you good advice, or, some instructors there? Like, who were your mentors that were kind of validating, when we have these moments of crises?
Yeah, it was, I have to say, I think very confusing because I would get jobs, actual jobs at professional theaters when I was in high school, and I would be working with actors some of whom had amazing careers on Broadway and had decided to sort of halfway retire to Florida.
Anyone you can
Or
mention?
uh yeah, let me think of a couple of names, and I'll report back on that
Yeah,
maybe.
no problem.
But but it was confusing because I would be, let me let me form this thought really quickly. Um, I think it was a confusing period of time because I was getting actual jobs at professional theaters while I was in high school. And I would work with actors who were actual professional actors from New York City who would be incredibly supportive, or who would say, you know, kiddo, I think you could have a future or whatever. And then I was in a high school all day, every day,
Yeah.
where, you know, they did 4 shows a year. And in 4 years, I only got cast in one of them. That should say something about the sort of environment that I was dealing in. And then I, you know, in the summer, after I was a sophomore in high school, I did Anne Reinking's Broadway Theater Project, which was
Yeah.
a summer intensive program that she started where she would bring down to Florida all of these extraordinary people to come and teach for 3 weeks. And it was, you know, people from all around the world would come and do that. And I got in as a 15-year-old. And so I had a lot of signals from the larger world that maybe I was okay at this. But again, I was spending my days in a high school environment that had not much interest in me being there.
Yeah.
And that was really challenging. And then I got into a really good college. I went to the University of Michigan for musical theater and spent the first year or two there really not sure that I belonged there because I was with an amazingly talented class, all of whom were, you know, the big stars where they came from. And I had no such confidence. And
Even though you
I,
were technically working professionally, you
yeah, I mean, I think it's partially that thing where, you know, it feels a little cliche, but it feels like, you know, 10 people can say nice things about you, but
yeah.
you'll remember the 2 people that don't say nice things about you.
Welcome to my
I think it was
comments. Yeah.
seriously.
Yeah.
And so I think it was a version of that, but I also think it was the kind of thing where, again, for 4 years of high school, all day, every day, I was in that one environment. And so I think that was the thing that felt really reinforced.
Yeah. Eh,
And so, but again, even though there were incredibly challenging periods of time within that program, I always came back around to wanting to do it. And part of it too, thankfully, this is long gone, but part of it too, when I was a kid, was like, I'll show them.
yeah.
Like, watch me get into this really good college, watch me get into this really good summer program. It did provide a certain amount of drive at the time.
Yeah.
And I can't say that wasn't helpful.
That's amazing. And did you complete all 4 years to like back to back? Because I took some time off in mine and
In college, you mean?
yeah,
I did those 4 years consecutively.
that's incredible. So talk to me then about graduating from that and that moment. I mean, because you did musical theater, I guess that kind of does delegate you to New York, but was there a moment of like, do I go to LA? Do I go to New York? You know, like talk to me. Where was your head at?
I was pretty New York focused. My school only did a showcase in New York for one thing.
Oh, you guys had a showcase?
Yeah.
Wow.
Um, but also part of it was that, you know, the benefit of going to any sort of training program is you have the classes above you and you see what they end up doing and where they end up going. And almost everyone from my school at least started off in New York City. And so it just sort of felt like the thing you did.
Yeah.
And at the time too, I mean, I was 91% focused on doing musicals.
Yeah.
And that was what I trained for. That was a big part of what I loved originally. And so, New York City's the place for that.
And did you get representation through the showcase?
I did. I got an agent who was fine. And then a couple people from that agency ended up leaving a couple months later. And, there was much less interest in me at that agency once
Ah,
those people had gone.
yeah,
And, I mean, I got some pretty good advice early on that was just someone saying, it might take some trial and error for
yeah.
you to find the exact right people.
It's like dating,
And
you know?
totally. And I mean,
Yeah.
I didn't live in New York City this past year because of the coronavirus, but I have technically been based in New York City since 2008.
Me too.
And amazing.
Yeah.
And through that stretch of time, I had that first agency that had personnel changes that sort of affected my ability to work with them. I had a manager who fully ghosted all of her clients at one
Oh,
point.
God.
I had another manager who left the business. That trial and error point that someone made to me is exactly correct.
Yeah. Did you come here and live with a group of peers, or did you get your own thing solo figured out?
I lived with my best friend from college for 7 years in Sunnyside,
Oh,
Queens.
that's amazing.
AJ Shively, a phenomenal actor. And I'm so thankful for that. One, because it's so fun to live with your best friend for 7 years, but also because I think it gave both of us a real sort of home base
Yeah.
in those first couple years. And I think that was more crucial than maybe we realized, because I don't know that for my disposition, I could have been one of those people that, does like 8 sublets in their first 6 months or something like that.
It's so heavy, the New York living situation. But did you come here with a survival? Like, did you do anything at college that would allow you to do anything that wasn't hospitality, or did you do the hospitality thing?
I couldn't get hired to do the hospitality thing.
Really?
I, New York City restaurants are no joke, and it's hard to get
Yeah, the
hired.
expectation's so much higher.
Yeah. And so the first job I had was I worked at the 24-hour Apple store on Fifth Avenue and 59th Street.
I worked there too.
Oh my God, when?
I worked there from 2012 to 2013. I quit.
Wow.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. What did you do?
I was a
This could just
back
be
of
an
house
entire interview.
specialist. Oh man,
Amazing.
I I
Those people are
hated
very important.
I hated it. I'm a social being. I was hired to be on the floor, and then one manager was like, "What are you doing here?" And I was like, "I don't know. They put me here." And she's like, "Let me get you on the floor. It'll be 6 months." And then I tore my meniscus, and it was the best thing that happened to me because I was like, "Thank God I don't have to go there," because I was getting what's it called, disability. And
Oh
then I was
wow.
just like, by the time I was so healthy, I was like, this is a horrible job. I'm going back to college. And that's why I went back.
I love it. Yeah, I was a cashier, and I this could just be an entire interview about the Apple store on
Oh
Fifth Avenue
man,
and
I could
59th
talk
Street.
so much trash as I sit here on my
Same.
Apple computer.
Exactly. I mean,
Yeah.
I actually had I actually had a lot of really fun people that I worked there with, and I was sad to leave them. But what happened was I applied for a bunch of jobs all at once. The Apple store was just the first place to call. And then a couple weeks later, about a month later, I got a job that I ended up having off and on for about 2 years, typing transcripts at an office on 81st and Columbus, where how it worked was, 2020 or whoever would interview a subject for 2 hours, but they only show 6 minutes of it on television. And so we would type up the transcript of the whole 2 hours,
Wow.
and they would use that transcript to edit it to what you see on television. And that was a job that was only from 3 p.m. to 7 p.m. And
Perfect
so I could
hours for an actor.
schedule.
Yeah.
Exactly. And so I spent years of my life waking up first thing in the morning to go sign up for an EPA at the equity office, going back to Queens, going back to bed for 2 hours, waking up, getting ready for the audition, doing the audition at maybe like a 2:10 appointment slot, and then going to work from 3 to 7. And for a long time, that worked pretty well. That was not a bad setup to have for your first couple years.
Yeah. And at those EPAs, is that where you garnered the first credits, an off Broadway or Broadway type thing? Was it, or where did you get a co-star or guest star first?
Those EPAs were the main thing I had going on for a long time. I mean, because again, I had agents sort of off and on during that
Yeah.
period of time. Occasionally they would make things happen, but not often. And so those EPAs were often my way into those agent auditions was I would go to the EPA, hopefully do a good job, hopefully someone would notice, and then I would get a call back, but that callback was actually just the first round of agent appointments.
Got it.
And so that was really my foot in the door. And I did get a couple of jobs that way. But more importantly, I think I got a good amount of casting relationships that way because more often than not, the people at those EPAs are lower level assistants.
Yeah.
But 2 or 3 years later, they will be associates or they'll
Yeah.
have their own office. And there are some relationships that I have with casting directors who I still see regularly or who still ask for me to audition pretty regularly.
Like Telsey
Where,
or, one of the ones that does it all.
yeah, and the
Yeah.
first couple times I met them was in a closet sized room at the old Equity building.
Wow.
And
David Vicari.
sure,
Yeah.
yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, and so I really, that was what I had access to for a really long time. And I can't, I mean, the whole time, obviously, I wished that that was not my scenario,
Yeah.
but I guess I made it work okay. And to go back to what you asked about, maybe this is, I was about to like introduce the topic of TV and film, but
Yeah.
maybe
No,
I
no,
shouldn't
no.
do that.
That's
Maybe I
perfect.
should let you do it.
No, do it. Take us in, Oli.
Yeah. Interestingly, I think the first audition I got after my college showcase was to be a pretty big lead of a pretty big movie. And it was one of those searches, when they're looking for a young person in a film,
Newcomer.
sometimes, yeah, sometimes the floodgates are just wide open
Yeah.
to
Can you say what
everyone.
it
And so
was or?
I think the film actually changed titles a couple of times. And
Oh,
so I
wow.
can't actually, I think it was one of those films that in that moment was like everyone is going to be talking about this film, and there were some big actors attached, and then it ended up coming out with a different title many years later, and I don't
Oh, it
think it
got
ended
stuck in
up
development in the whole thing. Yeah.
exactly, but at the moment it was very clearly positioned to be a huge thing, and it was a studio film and all this stuff. And that was the first audition I got after my showcase, and I remember thinking, what in the world do I know about this? It's not really what I trained for.
Yeah.
I'm interested in some way. I mean, I knew in college, I felt like, yeah, I'll focus on musical theater in New York City, but television sounds cool. I grew up loving
You got
television. I
we all want to
definitely,
survive, and make money.
yeah, and I definitely envisioned that as later down the line, after I'd gotten a foothold in the theater, maybe then I would expand into television and film and see what that may have to offer. But again, the first audition I got was this big part in a big movie, and I ended up getting a couple callbacks for it.
Wow.
And so, and kind of noticing through that process that I felt really comfortable. I felt pretty confident. I liked the way that the audition was run more than I liked a big cattle call at Chelsea Studios.
Yeah.
And so that sort of planted a seed very early on that, yeah, you moved to New York City to do musical theater, but remember that other experience you had that felt pretty good?
Yeah.
How do we, how can we find more of that? And that was, another process of trial and error for a long time.
Wow. And so then when you went pretty far down that ladder, that must have given you a lot of confidence.
It, excuse me. um, it did give me a little bit of confidence, but I didn't in that moment know how to capitalize on it. And I didn't really have agents that I think really knew how to capitalize in it in that moment. And and so yeah, it was more just kind of in the back of my mind for a long time that that world might be interesting to you. And it was also a moment, I moved here in 2008. That was around the time that television was getting really, really, really good.
Yeah.
And a lot of it was starting to film in New York City, which had not been the case. And so I think it was just sort of timing in the universe at large where it was just a good time to be in New York City starting to get interested in television.
Yeah. Yeah. That's incredible. And what did you start having rapport with a lot of the, like Philip Huffman at Law and Order or those kind of offices?
Rapport might be putting it strongly. I mean, I was certainly taking a lot of classes at One on One and places
Oh,
like
so you did the
that.
one-on-one actors connection grind.
Plenty. Yeah. And for good or for bad, I mean, I do have nebulous feelings about that
Me too.
world and how it operates, but I also feel a little bit like living proof that it can help out a lot. And because again, it really did take, I moved here in 2008. I would say it wasn't until 2013, 2014 that I really felt like I had agents that I could really trust and managers that I could really trust.
Yeah.
And so again, similar to the EPAs, the main thing I could do for myself, again, like I had a manager who fully ghosted everyone. And so in that moment, I guess the only thing I can do is sign up for some classes and hope for the best.
So you were
I
doing the
guess I
same thing.
also,
You would get some good news from an EPA or an audition and come in and use that as, muscle or a way to re-network at, one-on-one. That's literally what I did. And that's how I started building up.
totally. And and I think what I learned in that system, which may be different now because it's been a little while and I know that those classes have undergone a lot of shifts over the years, but I
And a
remember
lot of
learning
rules from SAG, because it got pretty
exactly.
sketchy there for a second.
Yeah, and I feel like I missed that moment where it got kind of sketchy by, 6 months or a year.
Yeah.
I wasn't really doing that much at that moment, but I realized pretty early on that if you can go into those classes and take them as seriously as you take your auditions and be as prepared as you would be for your audition, you can get some real mileage out of them. And those were really, again, similar to what I said about EPAs, a lot of relationships that are great relationships that I've now had for a long time started in those classes.
So for all those actors listening that are in those, CD workshops in LA or here in New York, you did get auditions from them. There is hope.
I did. One thing that was helpful for me, and again, I'm a little out of it, so I don't know if this is still possible, but one thing that was helpful for me was figuring out which teachers and which studios would let you bring your own scene
The best, the
rather than,
BYOS. Bring your own sides.
yeah, because I had been a little burned a couple times where I would just be assigned something that in no world am
So
I right
awful.
for.
God.
Yeah, but once I started to learn which studios or which teachers would let you bring your own, I had one scene that I would do if it was a casting director who mostly did comedies, and it was a scene that I knew I could do really well in my sleep. And then I had one scene that I would do if it was a casting director who mostly did more drama.
Wow.
And so I was able, and they're probably still in my folder over there, those two
Right
scenes.
here. Dude, our journeys are the same. I love this. And so so
Yeah,
so talk to me. Was the first thing that you booked co-star guest star wise, was that from one-on-one or from an agent?
it was from an agent that I was freelancing with,
Wow.
who's not an agent anymore. But I had noticed on the one on one website that they have those success
You
stories or
were one of
whatever
the
you call
success
them.
stories?
I don't know about that, but it was an agent whose name I had seen a lot in those success stories that said, so and so booked their first co-star after
Yeah.
meeting this agent at one-on-one.
Yeah.
And so then I went to meet that agent, and she said, I might be able to help you out. And then my first co-star, which was one line on Unforgettable on CBS,
Wow.
came as a result of an audition that she got me.
That's incredible. And did she ask you to sign then?
No, she did not.
Oh, really?
She's
No way.
um, she's not an agent anymore, and so maybe she was already sort of one foot out the door at that
Yeah.
point,
Yeah.
or maybe she just didn't like me that much. Who knows? But no, I was able to get that first job from her, and so I'm thankful forever for her and for that.
That's so beautiful. And then did that help you amplify that into the guest star, into the, reoccurring, the old sayings, you get the first line, get the second line, get the third line, get five lines, and is that what you did tactically?
Yeah, it was very slow but steady-ish progress from there. I mean, I think it helped a lot to have one thing on my resume where a casting director could go, okay, someone let him on a TV
On a
set.
$1 million set, this guy's, you can trust him.
Right. And
Yeah.
so I think after I got that first job, I think then it was easier to get auditions.
Yeah.
And then it was easier to get jobs because you have more auditions.
I know.
And it was and can still feel like it's really slow going. It was not like a light switch flipped overnight and suddenly I have all these appointments. Because the other thing too that feels worth mentioning as a component of this, I guess, is that I'm not like a sort of CW young and stunning type. I'm a
Riverdale.
character
Yeah.
actor.
Yeah.
Right. I'm a strange character actor in a lot of ways. And so there's not always a ton of opportunities for that exact box or whatever you would want to say. And so that, like anything else, there are moments where that has really benefited me. And there have been moments where it has not. And so that also fed into the conversation about co-stars moving up into guest stars where yeah, ideally at a certain point you only want to be a guest star and not
Yeah.
a
You got to say
co-star.
no to those because they bring your value down?
Right, but also there aren't always a ton of great guest stars for
Yeah.
my box. And so that just feels worth mentioning as a component of all this.
That's beautiful. And then I imagine you eventually found an agent as you got more credits that took a liking to you and helped you develop your career.
Yeah, I was doing Saturday night off Broadway at the York, this musical it's the first musical Stephen Sondheim ever wrote when he was in his early 20s. And it was only the second time this has been done in New York City. And it was so fun with this amazing, amazing cast. And I had a really nice part in it. And so as a result of that, I had a handful of agent meetings. And I was with a manager at the time who was pretty good. But you also want an agent if you
Yeah.
can get one. And and so I had a couple meetings as a result of having been in Saturday night. And they were interesting because I was saying to these agents, at the time I had probably been on 2 or 3 TV shows, maybe I had done 2 or 3 films. And I was saying in these meetings, I know you just saw me in this big musical, and I know that I went to college at this big musical theater college, but the thing that I'm much more interested in right now is television.
Yeah.
And almost all of the agencies that I met with in that moment said, that sounds like cool, that's cute, but we want what we have access to, and what we would send you out for is musical theater. And then there was one agent when I said, I'm much more interested in developing my television career at this moment in time. There was one agent who went, great. Yeah, I think we can do that. And so I went, okay,
Is that
it's you and
Eddie?
I. Yeah,
Yeah.
who I'm still with today. And it's been 6 or 7 years, and I trust his taste, and he knows me really well, and I think he's really smart, and I think I've benefited from being at a smaller sort of boutique agency, and yeah, I'm incredibly thankful, but it did take, I think Saturday Night was 2014 or 2013, so
Wow.
5 or 6 years after I moved to New York City. It took a while to find a person where it fully clicked as opposed to partially clicked.
That's so beautiful. And, you have an incredible resume, and I do want to get to Falcon and the Winter Soldier, but talk to me,
Yeah.
you've worked with so many amazing people, Bill Pullman on The Sinner, The
Mhm.
Blacklist, The Deuce with my homie Chris Bauer and David Simon,
Uh-huh.
and you did it twice on Plot Against America. Talk to me about auditioning and getting, the bigger and the bigger parts. What do you there isn't a key, let's say, but how do you get better at that? Like that's a really hard question to answer. I apologize, but if we can tackle that, that'd be beautiful.
Yeah, I think that a lot changed for me in my auditions for television and film when I went in acting like I was shooting the job,
Yeah.
acting like it was my close up on the day that I was filming this scene. Because I think that that really helped me sort of hyper focus and block everything else out the way that you have to when you're shooting. Because when I'm shooting something on a set, it can't bother me that the sound guy is on his phone, or that
Yeah.
we're running 6 hours behind and everyone's yelling at each other. You have to find a way to still deliver your best in that moment. Not that you're always able to, God knows, but you at least have to try to. And I think that once I was approaching my auditions that same way, going, this is my close up, and how would I behave as if I were shooting my close up? And I need to be as prepared as I would be to shoot my close up in the time I'm given, which is not always a lot of time. But I think that that approach locked something in for me. And I think that pretty quickly after that, I think I started to see better results more frequently. Because the other thing that that did, the other added benefit of it, is that it sort of made, just as I described how it would be on a set, it sort of made everything in that casting room irrelevant.
Yeah.
Where if the casting director was
Not
a little
nice.
dismissive,
Yeah.
or yeah, it I still had to, when he or she pressed record, I still had to fully do it.
Yeah.
And I also think that, combined with the feeling that as I was starting to get to audition for better and better parts in better and better projects, just the approach became, this is such a great part in such a great script. This audition might be the only time I ever get to play this part.
Yeah.
And so I want to feel like I fully did it.
Yeah.
I don't want to feel like I let them throw me off. I don't want to feel like I took in their weird energy and that disrupted my one take at this amazing scene or something like that. And again, you don't always succeed, but I think that those two thoughts combined sort of became the bar that I was always trying to reach.
Yeah. That's incredible. And you did 3 episodes of The Deuce. Talk to me about working with David Simon, who in my opinion is the Shakespeare of our time, the one of the best, I'll say it. I believe it. He's the best.
Yeah. I If I could, I've said this to David, I've said it to Alexa Fogel, who casts for him.
Alexa.
If I
Oh God.
Truly, if I could just be forever a David Simon contract player,
A David Simon muse.
dream of dreams, because I'm with you. There are a lot of smart people in the world. And every once in a while, it's also how I felt when I worked with Stephen Sondheim. Every once in a while, you come across someone where you go, oh, your brain is on a whole other level.
Yeah.
Even the very, very, very smart people are sort of here. And then there are a couple of people above that.
Yeah.
And David Simon, without question, is one of them. And I thought The Deuce was an incredible TV show. I
So
think that
great. A lot
what
of
what the
Krumholtz, Emily Mead, Chris Bauer, they're all friends.
yeah, I mean, I only really got to work with Chris, who I
He's the
loved.
best. God, he's my brother. I love that guy.
Yeah, we had a lot of fun together. I mean, one of my favorite days in acting was my second episode of The Deuce, my second day there. It was a scene that was just me and Chris, which was almost all of my stuff.
The
And
doctor's
it did.
interior scene with, yeah,
Mhm.
I love that scene.
Thank you so much. Me too.
Yeah.
That's the kind of scene that you read it and you just go, "Oh, how exciting that
Yeah.
I get
Yeah.
to do this." Um,
And you get to talk about rim
Susanna,
jobs.
exactly. Um, just what your parents imagined for
uh,
you when
hey, perfect Simon
a life
material.
in
Yeah.
exactly a life in the arts. But Susanna White was directing that episode, and she's wonderful. And it just had that feeling that doesn't happen often enough, but is what keeps us going, where there is, lightning strikes in that room or something. And Chris is so amazing to act with. And I think we realized pretty quickly, I don't want to speak for him, but I think I realized pretty quickly, but I think he did as well, that we act together really well.
Yeah.
And that if he throws the ball one way, I'll respond and I'll
Yeah.
throw the ball back. And that our performance really, in the most perfect world, the scene happens in the space between the two people.
Yeah.
It doesn't happen with me forcing my ideas onto you.
Yeah.
And I
And
think
it's
Chris and I
so,
had a
so rare
really,
to get that, you so rarely get that, I mean, it's incredible that you shined in that, man. I'm just so proud of you.
thank you.
It's beautiful.
Thank you.
And
And I think, sorry, go ahead.
no, no, please, you.
I think I lost my train of thought. It was something about how great Chris is. But yeah, please keep going.
Well, obviously, we got to talk about the massive elephant in the room. Talk to me about Falcon and the Winter Soldier. How did this come your way? I mean, you've been in New York, darling. You were on all the New York, amazing shows, and I think I can talk about this. If not, we'll edit it out. But I had auditioned for some Marvel things before that were
Oh,
back
cool.
in the Netflix days. But
Mhm.
obviously sometimes those go under fake sides and you don't know what the project is. And talk to me about, how did this come your way? Did you even know what it was when you got it?
No, I didn't. I didn't know anything. I got a self-tape audition for, I think it was called Untitled Marvel Project Number 4.
Yeah.
And the role just said doctor, it didn't say a name. And the scene was a very generalized version
Yeah.
of what
Fake
the scene
sides.
ended up
Yeah.
being. Exactly. No characters had their real names. There were no identifying plot details. And so I made a tape in this apartment with my best friend and didn't have a lot of time for some reason. And I can't remember why. I don't know if I was working on something else or if the deadline was really tight. But I sent off 2 takes of it, which I like to do if I can, and
Can
felt
you can
pretty
you
crappy
expound
about it.
upon that real quick? Because I love doing 2 takes too. Talk to me about why you send 2 takes, because that's a huge question for actors.
Yeah, I think that if you have, we're not given all the information when we get these auditions.
Yeah.
And so if you have multiple viable ways the scene could go, and the scene isn't 18 pages long, I don't know why you wouldn't send 2 options. I think you have to make sure that they're 2 really good,
Different.
really
Yeah.
valid
Yeah.
options.
Yeah.
And Lord knows not every scene has a multitude of possibilities. But I thought for this one that there was a version where he was incredibly scared and nervous the whole time. And then I thought there was a version where he was able to sort of calmly and clearly talk about his vague history in these fake audition sides. But even so, I sent 2 takes and woke up the next morning, I remember really vividly thinking that was a really good opportunity, and I don't know that those takes are good enough.
Yeah.
I really beat myself up over it
Yeah.
for, a day or 2. And, usually there is some sort of intermediate step between an audition and getting a job where you'll get some heads up that, hey, you're in the final 3 people they're considering, or they're double checking your availability or
Or
something
your
like that.
pins, Yeah.
Exactly. There's a very often something like that. And for this, there was radio silence for about a month. And then
Wow. So
all of a
you let it
sudden,
go.
yeah,
Yeah.
totally. And
Yeah.
then, but every once in a while it would cross my mind and I would go, oh, that wasn't
The one
good.
that got
And
away. Yeah.
totally. And then out of the blue, probably a month later, if not 6 weeks later, got an email that said offer for Untitled Marvel Project number 4.
With 7 NDAs
And
attached.
right, exactly. But still no
Yeah.
actual information.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um and it was really mind blowing. I mean, I think that's something we're all trying to figure out, right? Is what's the formula? And the answer is that there is none. But I've had auditions where I felt like I delivered the perfect version of what I would want to do. And I feel like they've clapped and cheered at the end of it, and I never see those people again.
Yeah.
I have left auditions in tears because I thought it went so poorly and gotten that job.
Always.
My
Yeah.
audition for the Deuce, I remember thinking, I think that was fine, but like I don't know that anything great happened. And you just know, but when you're the person, and it's usually something intrinsic that is out of your control anyway.
Yeah.
And so for whatever reason, the Falcon and the Winter Soldier was the right part. And I was listening to this interview with Denise Goff, who I think is so phenomenal. And this is just the best thing I've ever heard, where she said at a certain point, she decided in her auditions that it's a little witchy, so get ready. But she decided that it was the spirit of the character sort of floating in the air, deciding which body is the right body for them in that moment. And so it's not the producers deciding, it's not the director deciding, it's the spirit of the role of Sam or whatever going, who's the right person to tell this story?
Yeah.
And and she said that helped her to not be competitive with anybody and to not be um it's so easy to fall down these crazy rabbit holes about why certain things aren't working out. And if you can just sort of simplify it and go, well, I wasn't the person Sam needed at that moment in time.
Yeah.
I think that maybe takes the pressure off of all of us in a lot of helpful ways.
Totally. And for Dr. Nagel, you get to work with Anthony Mackie, Sebastian Stan, and Daniel Brühl. Was that a 1 day shoot for you, or was it a couple days?
It was actually, these Marvel shows and Marvel films, I'm sure they have a budget. It certainly doesn't feel like they do when you're there, because we had the better part of a week to shoot that sequence. And we also had a full rehearsal day,
Oh,
which is
wow. Very rare.
unheard of.
Yeah.
And to be extra clear, it wasn't a full day, but there was a part of a day that was just devoted to an actual rehearsal, and not a fake TV rehearsal where you sit around and just sort of like mumble the lines,
Yeah, and
but
read
an
the action.
actual,
Yeah.
right, exactly, a legitimate rehearsal where we tried different blocking options and we talked about what's really maybe happening in the scene. And so then when we showed up to start shooting the next day, we actually had a pretty good idea of what we were going to do. And so I think that I want to say that we shot the sequence for 3 days, but the last day was reserved just for that big explosion.
Wow. Okay.
And so I think we shot the actual conversation part of it for 2 days.
In Atlanta?
And then in Atlanta, and then we all came back for the third day to blow the thing up.
And talk to me about, getting such, as they say, there's no small parts, but getting this incredible role in a pivotal scene in a pivotal, moment in the show. do you do you only have the character figured out, or was it in the rehearsal where you kind of all figured it out? Talk to me about making your choices as an artist and as an actor.
Yeah, I think that one thing that's been so comforting in a situation like this is to see that, yes, this is a gigantic project on a gigantic set, but the actual work of acting is the same,
Yeah.
whether you're in a closet in the East Village or if you're on this massive Marvel set, you're always asking the same questions. And or at least I'm always trying to figure it out dramaturgically in the same way. That's not to say that I have the same process for every single job. I do want my process to be fluid and open and in conversation with the processes of the other people I'm working with. But the basic questions of, who am I? What do I want? Where am I coming from? What are the things other characters are saying about me?
Yeah.
What are the things I say about myself?
Did
Those
you
are
watch all the
all,
films if you hadn't already?
I didn't have time. I mean, I got the job and pretty quickly had to go do it within about a week or two.
Wow.
And so I also felt like I had my work cut out for me just memorizing it,
Yeah.
because he has a lot of fairly lengthy speeches that were a little longer when we shot them, actually. And so I think that was my foremost concern, because obviously the last thing you want when you show up is to,
Be rough on the
uh,
lines. Yeah.
yeah, especially when it's very clearly a sequence about you delivering
Yeah.
as well as you possibly can. It's going to be very clear if I'm dropping the ball in that
Yeah.
moment. And so, I mean, I had many moments. It helps me to memorize if I can physicalize it a little bit. And so, I mean, I was walking up and down the lobby of my hotel, just sort of like muttering lines to myself, hoping that they'll sink in deeper that way somehow. But yeah, I was excited because I felt like, I looked up what Dr. Wilfred Nagel looks like in the comic books. I don't look a single thing like him. And so I feel like that sort of freed me up to realize, okay, we're not doing a literal interpretation of what he looks like
Yeah.
or stands like or is drawn like in those, so we can come up with our own thing. And that's also where Kari Skogland, who directed the series, is so phenomenal, because I've worked with so many phenomenal directors and I've been so lucky. But Kari, at least in my experience, has the most unbelievable balance of, she knows what she wants, she's clear on her vision, but she's also completely open to what you may have to bring. And maybe it's also because there's time. And so we don't feel, a different kind of project would go, the Dr. Nagel sequence is in one location, we can slam through that before lunch.
Yeah.
But because we have many days on this thing, I think that enables Kari to go, cool, well, like, what if we try a couple takes like this? Or there was one idea that I had where she very clearly didn't see it at first, but because she's who she is, went, show me one. Let's do a take with that. And then we did it, and she went, yes, I love that. That's exactly right.
Amazing. Yeah.
And so I really think the time has a huge amount to do with that. But, I felt like I had my work cut out for me, especially filling out the history
Yeah.
of those speeches where he mentions certain people, he mentions a lot of events, and just wondering about, what did that feel like? Or what are
Yeah.
your opinions of this person? And it is so nice to feel like, yeah, you might be on this multi-million-dollar thing, but when it comes time to do your scene, it's similar to every other time you've done a scene in
Yeah.
every other scenario.
That's incredible. And talk to me now. What's it been like having it air and the world sees it? Has that been intimidating, a blast? Like where's your head at?
It's been all of those things. I mean, it's really fun. I feel really lucky that I like how it turned out.
Yeah.
That's not always how we feel, as I'm sure
No,
you know.
absolutely not.
Um, And also because we tried so many different versions of this character in the shoot, there were, versions where he was very numb. There were versions where he was terrified the whole time. There were versions where he was more hostile or less hostile. And so I didn't know what the
Which one they
character
were going to
would
go
be in
with.
the,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. And because I really do believe that that's the job. It's not useful for the editor to have 7 takes that look the exact same.
Yeah.
And so that's also putting a great deal of trust into those people's hands. And they could have edited together a performance that looked insane.
Yeah.
If, one line was from the numb take,
Yeah. Yeah.
the
Yeah.
next line was incredibly angry or whatever. And so it was a relief, and it was exciting to feel like, oh, I actually like how this turned out. And the Marvel Cinematic Universe is its own entire experience in terms of those fans are so passionate, but I only have Instagram. I'm not on Twitter or anything
Yeah.
like that, but the people that have showed up on Instagram have said such nice things and such welcoming things. And
Amazing.
yeah, it's also just funny and wild to feel like, I'm an actor just trucking along trying to get jobs. And then one of the jobs I happened to get threw me into the middle of this
Yeah.
worldwide phenomenon. I mean,
Sensation.
that
Yeah.
was,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I really do identify as a sort of scrappy New York actor doing theater off Broadway and doing these sort of very niche cable and streaming TV shows for the most part. And the Marvel Cinematic Universe was not on my radar as a thing that might happen to me one day. And I'm so thankful that it did. It's been
Yeah.
so fun and really exciting, but it also feels a little foreign in this moment because we're not moving through the world like normal. And so it does feel like it has moved the needle in my career in some way, but I don't really have a sense of that because I'm still just inside in my pajamas all the
And we're
time.
still in the pandemic, but that kind of leads to my next question. I'm so proud of you, brother. That's incredible work you did.
Thank
I
you.
hope I get the chance someday to do half of what you did. And Marvel,
I
I'm
believe.
available. Wink, wink. And you know, talk to me. What's next for you?
I mean, that's also a really funny component of this moment is that this hugely exciting thing is going on that I'm really proud of and really excited about. I also still feel like, I don't want to say I feel like a beggar trying to get my next job, but I a little bit do. I'm losing my SAG health insurance next month. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like
I know.
and so
6 months
it's
free
funny to feel
Cobra
like,
though. So yeah,
thank God,
yeah,
thank
yeah,
God. But it's funny to feel like there's this very exciting moment, but also the feeling of
real
none of
life.
those jobs worked out. Like none of
Yeah,
those things I auditioned for came through. And but I also think, I'm well acquainted with that at this point. I've been at it for a while, and that's just the thing we signed up for is that kind of roller coaster. And so, there are certain things that I'm aware of that are happening that I would love to be part of. And there have been a handful of jobs the past couple of months that have come really close, but it is a blank slate. And also, because of the pandemic, we're in a
yeah.
moment where
Everything's
there are less,
slower. Yeah,
there are less jobs, there are more actors available for those jobs. And so, my hope is that the next job feels like a progression from this one in some way. That can mean 300,000 different things. But there are definitely people I'm dying to work with. David Simon has another mini series coming
yeah.
up,
The
and
Spanish one or the
I believe it's about. I believe I might be wrong. We might not want this on the podcast, so I'm wrong. I think it's about the newspaper in Baltimore.
Oh yeah, 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 yeah. No, that's public. Yeah,
Um, yeah, yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
But there are certain things like that that I loved working for him. I loved working for Antonio Campos on The Sinner, and he's doing The Staircase coming up.
yeah.
I do try to keep track of, people I want to continue working with and
It's
what
the
they're up
work
to.
we have to do as actors and being our own agents and managers. But that's incredible, man. And I'm so grateful for your time. Two final questions for you.
You
You've
too.
been incredible. You have to come back on. I'm not asking,
Happy
and
to.
we have to work together. A
I would love
must.
that.
And so
In the
talk.
Marvel Cinematic Universe, ideally.
Yes, yeah, or Star Wars. Wink, wink. But
Happy to. Would love it.
uh, what's kept you inspired during the pandemic?
Oh, wow. That's a challenging question. I think that what has kept me inspired is what usually keeps me inspired. And that I think tends to be the work that my friends are doing
Yeah,
and the work that, and that doesn't necessarily always mean show business work, but the pandemic has given me more time to keep track of, the TV shows that my friends are on and that kind of stuff. And, I love seeing great acting no matter who it is, but when it's great acting done by someone you love
yeah,
and know really well and know what they have gone through in order to do that great acting, that keeps me inspired like crazy. And I've finally had some time to catch up on a lot of things, and I think that has kept me going.
yeah.
But I don't know. I don't know that I've always done a good job in the pandemic of remaining inspired.
None of us have, but that's part of the journey and the beauty of you giving back. And final question, man. For all the young actors that are listening right now in the pandemic and struggling and at one-on-one and at Actors Connection and doing the actors access grind, self-submitting and
Mhm.
feeling kind of down and out on their luck. Any words of wisdom or advice you'd have for them?
I feel like it's funny to think about that because sort of all at once, like 26 possible pieces of advice
Yeah.
sort of rush in. But I
Sorry, I
think
know
that,
that's a loaded question again. I apologize.
no, of
Yeah.
course. I mean, I think that, you have to love acting more than you love success at acting.
Yeah.
And I feel like I've
Fantastic
seen a
answer.
lot.
Wow, I'm stealing
Thank
that.
you so
Yeah,
much.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think that if what you're going for is some sort of shiny success based goal, you're in for such
Ooh.
a rough
Oh
ride.
God.
You're you're in for a rough ride no matter what. But if I think if you love acting more than you love success, I think that will give you some sort of internal compass that can carry you much of the way. And I also think that, we didn't get to touch on it too much, but
Episode two.
so
That's why I'm
many,
bringing you back. Yeah,
happy to.
yeah.
Um, but I think that, the scrappy theater projects I've made with friends of mine, or the small film projects I've made with friends of mine, those kinds of things I think are easy to overlook or easy to sort of discount as not career building opportunities, or not the kinds of things that like everyone is going to have eyes on. But I think that if you can stay close to the people that you love working with wherever you're at, and it feels a little cliched these days to say, create your own work, and that's not exactly what I mean. But I think that I've been so I've been so sort of buoyed by the relationships that I've had with people where we were all sort of scrappy and starting out together 10 years ago, making weird plays. And those experiences are some of the most creatively fulfilling experiences I've ever had. But also, you all sort of get to like evolve together as the years go on and hopefully continue working with each other and hiring each other and all of those things. And I'm so glad that my first couple years in New York City were full, excuse me, of, weird theater downtown that made people feel strange when they saw it. but as opposed to only trying to be on like a national tour of a big musical because it would make me some money. I don't know. I mean, I'm having a hard time distilling the point I'm trying to make.
No,
I
I
guess I'm
think
just saying like
you've conquered it. I think, your first,
I
yeah,
think it's yeah, I think it's easy to blow off those small creative projects, but I think in the long run, having a little more perspective, I think those might actually take you further,
yeah,
even just in terms of your satisfaction,
yeah.
as opposed to always grasping for the fanciest thing you can find.
I can't think of a better way to end this. I mean, what an incredible interview. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I got so
Thank
much
you.
love for you, man, and I'm so proud of you. And dude, this is so radical, man. The best is yet to come. I know it.
I hope so for both of us.
Yeah,
Um,
please.
I
Well,
think, I mean, I think, I was about to say, I think what you're doing on this podcast is so amazing. And I think that it's such an amazing service to actors worldwide that I think if I had had something like this when I was in high school, um, I think it's so amazing to have because I think it's easy for people to talk about what has happened to them in a very sort of like shiny, sound bitey kind of way.
yeah.
But I don't know that that's helpful for anybody
I don't think it is
ultimately.
either. And man, I would rather be acting, if I'm honest, but this is, when I have those auditions and I have to throw them away, I come home and I get to chat with you and remind myself that I love acting more than the success. And that's why I'm in this. And, one day we'll do Star Wars together and we'll laugh about the time we
Please,
were doing a podcast together. And I can't wait for that day. And you got to come back,
same.
brother. And so much love. Okay.
To you too. I'm happy to come literally anytime.
Amazing. All right. To be continued.